Thank you for the work that you all do around the country, particularly the work that you've done supporting Christchurch over the past year or so. I was just about to take this off. I thought, should I wear it right here or should I not? And I decided I would, because a year ago when I was here at this conference, this was the thing that got me home, because I'm no one official, and went to the airport and sort of used it. I sort of swanned in on the coattails of Murray Sinclair and said, I'm with Civil Defence and I want to get back to Christchurch. And then was desperately sitting with Alicia, desperately trying to get on the Hercules plane down to Christchurch. And I was like, yep, I'm, trying to. It worked quite well actually. Ended up flying to Blenheim and driving down from there to Christchurch with a carload of journalists from Radio Live. And I lost a short straw because they told me that they were going to have to work really hard for the next weeks and months to sort out everything with the earthquake and with the media. Only to have a conversation, assuming that I'd be doing nothing, of course. Only to have a conversation with them a couple of days later from Auckland. We're back safe and sound, and our team actually hadn't had any sleep by that point, but. Nevertheless, so today I thought I would just talk about the role of spontaneous volunteering, a bit of a story about how the whole thing happened, how it came about, some of the big lessons that we learned along the way, some of the major frustrations we came across, and some views from a report that the Volunteer Army Foundation, which is the trust that we've started as a result of all the earthquake work, has commissioned really between the Federated Farmers, the Farming Army, us students, and talking to a few key people around in and out of council, sort of in SERA and out of SERA, of people who are just giving their thoughts and feedback into a report, whether they're meant to or not, but just to actually try and form a body of opinion about the role of spontaneous volunteers in a disaster and how we can best utilise this incredible energy that there is in New Zealand for giving in this sort of situation. So in September, back when the first earthquake hit, I was in my flat in Riccarton. It was, to put it bluntly, it was one of the houses I really wish had fallen down. There was 12 of us living there, mould on the walls, really just a grungy sort of place. Went out to see my neighbours, wanted to do something to help, and I was sort of told they didn't need any help, they were okay. They were a lovely newly immigrated family from Pakistan who were just living next door. And I sort of said to them, I've come from a rural background, and power blackouts and all the like weren't terribly new, and I'd actually slept through most of the earthquake, so stayed up writing an essay most of the night before. And so I wasn't really too uptight about the whole thing. I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but said to this lovely family with their two little babies in swaddling clothes, earthquakes are completely normal for Christchurch. You just go back to sleep, it's fine, and just to get used to it. And it sort of turned out to be quite a prediction, and it was pretty horrendous what happened, as that's progressed. What was most evident straight away to me, I went round to a friend's flat and we had a nice cooked breakfast, and we were students. We were on the western side of Christchurch, and we were very, very privileged not to have dealt with or actually experiencing what so many people throughout our city were going through. We were watching Breakfast on TVNZ, and as somebody said before, the footage started to repeat itself. Understandably, there was a lot of so much out there, and we were watching intently for 3 or 4 hours. What was fresh all the time was social media. There was this incredible self-journalism that was happening, and it kept happening the whole time. Whether people were uploading their information about their liquefaction, they were making contact with friends overseas, they were making sure that they knew where we were going or what you were doing, or anything like that. And we were very privileged that the internet didn't fail in that way. I guess most importantly, and sort of most poignantly, I got invited to 4 or 5 earthquake after parties on Facebook. Students, right? Great time to have a party. Uni's definitely going to be cancelled for a couple of weeks, so yeah, let's do something like that. And some cheeky swine actually was already selling a T-shirt for $35 on Facebook. Now, this is about 10 o'clock in the morning, saying I survived the Christchurch earthquake for $35. And I was just like, it really grated with me. Like so many, if you'd seen it, this is the wrong thing that we need to be doing right now. I wanted to do something to help. And like many people, I rang up the council call centre, and bless them, it was a pretty difficult thing to try and register as a volunteer. They asked me what skills I had, and I said, well, No, nothing really. I'm a student. I could come and get a wee group of people could come do some typing for you. We could come and we could go and do some cleaning, or we could cook some food. And it was just a big unknown, and they didn't quite know what to do with us. And this is so they said, your best advice we can give is you just stay at home because you're unqualified and don't really have any skills to offer. So, okay, great, thanks. Meanwhile, Facebook is going crazy with this massive after party, which I'm sure was going to make great headlines. And so I was that evening I started a Facebook page. It was after Megan talking about the messaging and media communications, I chose a dreadful name for a start. It was called the Student Base for Earthquake Cleanup Volunteers or something like that, something sort of ridiculous and huge. And it was an event on Facebook. So you can create events on Facebook, you can create pages on Facebook, or you create profiles, which is a person. So I'm a person on profile on Facebook, and you can also have an organisation, or you could have a person, a celebrity, or whatever. So I created an event. I invited about 200 people to that event, and each person, I sort of picked some key people from throughout the university community. Some of the big clubs, like the NSOC and the UCOM, NSOC the ones that do the Under 500 and cause all that disruption down south. The NSOC, who destroyed the town hall last year with one of their parties, and a couple of the other sort of groups like that, who just have the really strong networks that go out to so many different places and have... I guess, to put it bluntly, all the cool people in the clubs, because that's the ones we wanted to target. Got to target the cool people, because then if the cool people do it, everyone else will come on board. And so wanted to target them. So they invited a few more people to it, and eventually it grew, and somehow we ended up with 4,000 people attending, about 7,000 people invited to it, and 3,000 people not attending. To be honest, I had no idea what we were going to do, and there was this they talk of importance of getting media releases out straight away and making sure the communication is good to prevent people backlashing through letters to the editor. But I tell you, they backlashed at me thick and fast for attempting to do this from the online community in the hours following the setting this thing up. Like, are you actually doing anything? Is this just a big false thing? Why isn't Civil Defence doing this? Who is Sam Johnson? What in the world are you trying to do here? What are you going to do? So after talking with them, trying to get through to council again and trying to just, what can we do with this group of people? Is there anything we can go and do? Knowing full well that this is actually, Civil Defence are focused on the high level, high risk, a real emergency side of this situation. But what do we do with this mass of people who just want to give something, both to help the people who are the biggest victims, but also for their own mental health and helping. And that's one of the biggest lessons we learned between September and February. So I said to them, okay, I was talking to one of the city councillors and rang Bob at Shearing and said, what can we do? He's like, just go and do something in the neighbourhood. Go and find some silt. There's a lot of silt. Why don't you go and clear that? And I was like, that's what I was thinking. Can we just go anywhere? And he's like, well, yeah, we're not going to stop you yet. And so he thought it was myself and 12 friends, so we went out to Horswell. So popped up on Facebook, look, let's meet at Horswell tomorrow. Students don't like getting out of bed too early, so we said 10 a.m, and we'll meet at 10 a.m, and we'll start from there. We'll borrow or steal a shovel, and we'll go and just do some shoveling, and that's what we did. It got to about 11 o'clock on that day, and I started thinking, what's the one thing that's going to keep these sort of students who we're pretty flimsy at the best of times that stay on focus and on task. What's going to keep them here? What's going to keep us focused? And that was food. So we went down to the supermarket and bought all the budget tomato relish and ham and budget bread rolls that $156 on my bank account would allow, and then bought those, and we set up a little team of people, a flat of students who didn't really want to go shoveling, but wanted to be in charge of something. So we're like, here's a team, you're in charge of cooking. Can you put these rolls together? Can you go and start collecting food around from the neighbourhoods to feed the 150, 200 students that by this time had turned up on the street, and we'd actually run out of work to do, and we didn't even know where to go next. And so that's how it evolved. And then right from the start, though, there's also this intense media interest in what was a very positive story straight away following the earthquake. Got in touch, and Bob Parker rang me the next morning and said, hi Sam, I've seen this Facebook page, by which stage was at 5,000 or 6,000 people, and of course, with a lot of us not knowing the ins and outs of social media, just because 5,000 people click attending doesn't mean any more than 200 actually turn up. And so civil defence's huge worry, understandably, was that I was about to send 5,000 people into a disaster zone, 5,000 drunken students, more to the point, into a disaster zone to do something. And so poor Alan, and Alan he was a saviour actually right at the start, because we ran across a fair few barriers with senior council staff and some few different people who were just saying, you can't do this is illegal, you're going to have to go through the channels, you've got to register all the volunteers, you need to sit them down for 20 minutes and inform every single one of them of the risks, you need to have them, all their next of kin details and all that recorded so that you know where they're going and what they're doing. And Alan came along and he just got handed us, and as you can see there, he excellent chance of turning to custard. Alan provided a really crucial role of sort of liaising between myself and my team and council and everything else that goes on within that. And because I had no idea, and really we wanted to get stuck in and do things, and they really just were that link to help make it all happen. And just tick the boxes where they needed to be ticked to allow us to carry on without having to get bureaucratised, if that's a word. So the key things with the Volunteer Army back in September were the relationships that we built up. One morning, Paula Bennett rang me and she said, "Hi Sam, I'd just like to give you some money." I was like, "Oh, cool, that'd be great, thanks." And she's like, "Well, how about $5,000? And oh, yeah, that'd be super, thank you." And so the next person we aid rings, and suddenly it pops up in my bank account, and we just get commercial caterers in to feed people. But by this stage, I guess we were having, where's our sort of stats? We were having, this is by day 2 or 3, when you've got 300, 400 people volunteering a day. We'd moved down to the eastern suburbs of Christchurch, and we're just going street by street, door knocking on houses. So got some money to help pay for things. The fed farmers were really crucial as things built and developed, and the council and civil defence were crucial just to help us along the way. Though sometimes it was more of a hindrance, no disrespect, but there was a few problems which I'll cover off later. Politicians, actually, I've got them circled on my page here, and because they were an interesting mix. Because we were a bunch of 23 now. I feel like I've grown up finally. The politicians were trying to sort of bully us around of where we should go and what we should do, who's screaming the loudest, where their constituents were. So we had sort of that dynamic to manage too. And as fundamentally a group of law and engineering students in our 3rd and 4th year, we really weren't accustomed to this whole thing. But one of the biggest changing and thinking we had to go across was suddenly from looking at all these people like, you know what you're doing all the time, you know all the answers, to seeing you've got no clue what's going on, nor do we, so let's just try and do what we can. And that's sort of how it evolved. We got given some pretty strict rules from civil defence, which were really good. There is a huge safety component to this entire thing. And in terms of building a model for the future where this can be repeated, and while it's been a question in my mind for a long time, was this a special set of circumstances and a special set of relationships that enabled this to happen, or can it be something that we institutionalise but de-bureaucratise and make happen again? So one of the things was tracking every volunteer. So on the second day, after Bob rang, he said, we'd like you to meet at the school, it's a better meeting point, and we've got civil defence and we're going to get the army in to help coordinate it. And I said, that is fantastic, absolutely fine. You guys know what you're doing, off you go. Just you to let me know where you want the people and I'll advertise for them to go there. And we thought we could just position ourselves as the communications network, would just send people wherever was needed. They all turned up, went into a school hall, stood around for about an hour and a half. Everyone signed their name and address into a little notebook, which took sort of half an hour for a start. And then we split them into 4 teams and put a soldier in charge of each one and sort of set them to 4 different areas. And then sort of halfway through the day, I got in huge trouble, and I had this screaming, this guy, the senior council staff member, absolutely screaming his head at me for not signing everyone out. He's like, we signed them all in, you've got to sign them out, you're responsible for them. We can't take responsibility for this, and this is ridiculous, and this program should never be allowed to go ahead. How can you keep control over all this? And sort of said, well, we're not trying to keep control over it, we're just trying to facilitate the volunteering to happen. These people need to give, these people need some help, there's this free labour, you're not going to do it, let's have a go. And so we sort of agreed to disagree on the fact we need to sign all people in and out. We need to track our volunteers and we need to know where they are going and what they're doing at all different times. So I said to them, look, it got to after lunch and no one was really sure what was going on, where people were going, and the crux of it was there was a real fundamental lack of information and mapping of the areas where we were working. By the time we got to February, we'd sorted out that a lot more and built stronger relationships. But we said to them, we understand the importance of signing in and signing people out, but we're not going to write your name and address down. That's about the most useless thing ever. Okay, we'll just take their name and cell phone number and we'll write that on, we'll get a whole lot of computers there and we'll write it on a Google spreadsheet and we'll get all the information so it can be shared, so no matter where you are, you can look up and see where your different team is. So we knew the first 20 people that would come in would get their name and cell phone number, and they'd be in Group A, would have a group team leader with their cell phone number, and they'd be assigned to that group of streets on the map. And they'd move around and liaise around there throughout the day. And I guess as that system developed into February, one of the key systems when people would turn up on the day, the IT guys built a little system where you just bring your student ID or your driver's license. That gets barcode scanned, which takes all your information into a system. We'd know the first 30 or 50 people who came through the system would be registered and logged, and would know that they go on the first bus, bus A, with team leader X, and they go to Bexley. And so we could sort of have that was one unit as that developed. I'll touch on that later. One of the big problems right up, we didn't know whether to go into properties where people weren't home. And so we said, well, do we clear out every property, or do we clear out just some of them? Out in the Waimak, we were told, it was very methodical, we clear every single property the whole way along because of the potential health hazard from the silt blowing around when it dries. Pretty well justified, it was great. In Christchurch, it was very unsure. We were told, under no certain terms for a start, do not go into a property if someone's not home, because you can't be responsible for that, and we're not being responsible for that, so don't do it. And so we're like, okay, we won't do it. Get a call the next day, actually, do go and do every property. We need you to do every property. So we had to send people back in to fix up all the ones we left behind. The rules changed again the next day, and we're like, actually don't do all the properties, because some of them might be red zoned and it might be a waste of your time. And just these sort of flip-flops that happened quite a lot. And then the other main rule was that I personally accept all responsibility for every single thing that happens with the volunteers, because civil defence would take no part in it whatsoever. Which is kind of bizarre, but I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll just carry on. Alrighty. So some of the numbers from September, we sort of built up to about 500 people by day 6. And we were busing people by then. They were going out to the eastern suburbs in different areas. We'd have a suburb leader in charge of each different suburb who would liaise quite a lot with Fulton Hogan or City Care or the other contractors. And they would be pretty committed just to making sure the volunteers know where they're going. There were huge breakdowns in communication. I mean, some of the things that the students did on the street, which is why, I guess, the June operation with the Farming Army worked the best, because you've got this lovely little, bless them, my colleagues, my students would turn up in their nice, pretty white jeans and come out to shovel for a day, and would be shoveling the silt off a footpath, easily where a tractor could go or machinery could go and deal with it. So we tried to sort of focus all the energy into private properties. We only deal with silt, we only deal with private properties, and we really just want to do as much of as we can in that sort of situation. So I guess some of the biggest things that we learned from September, which helped us in February, is that operation went for sort of 2 weeks. And for a start, we could send sort of 500 students into one area, and they could find enough work to do throughout the day. Then we had the breakdown in information. We knew that a whole lot of people still needed a lot of help, but we didn't know how to actually locate that help. So we advertised through the media. The media has been a really crucial tool in all of this. Advertised through the media, can you email us if you need your property cleared? And then eventually we've got a system from an IT company called GeoOp. Can you text us if you can text us? Can you ring us if you need some assistance? Ideally, it would be a system that's easily managed through a council call centre, but that was under no certain terms was not happening. That was not a possibility. So the biggest things we learned about young people was the need for leadership. Even if it's just saying, you there with the white shirt on, can you just be in charge of these guys? I don't actually know what I want you to do, but you're just in charge of them, and we'll let you know. And so just keep them on task, keep them sort of moving and progressing through. So just having someone in charge, someone to go to make the hierarchy of communication flow through. So if someone had a problem, it could get right up and to the place it needed to go. They work effectively in large teams. It was physically and emotionally, mentally grueling, hard work. There was nothing nice about shoveling silt, especially if it's full of sewage. Sending 20 people into a property, we could get it done in an hour. I guess if you send 2 people in there and have them for the whole day, it's all sort of pretty basic, but things that we learnt along the way which were really important. And same with the farming army, sending groups of 20. It's quite a manageable number, and people can sort of take a rest. They can have a bit of fun. You can send some of the sort of the people who aren't so strong at shoveling out to the streets to actually door knock on doors and find the next places to go to. Students like instant gratification, so we like to be able to send them all into a place to have them cleaned up and look back when they'd get back at the end of the day to reflect on their work, particularly in February, and say, yeah, look what we did. We've achieved something today. I feel really meaningful. I feel my volunteering has actually made a difference, and my time is worthwhile going out to do this again. I'm not being puddled around by a meeting. I'm not being sat in a room while someone else decides what I do. I turn up at 10 o'clock. I get instantly given a shovel, and I get given a wheelbarrow, and I get given some gloves, and go and shovel for 2 hours, and I get given lunch. Then I have my afternoon off, and then we have a nice evening debrief. That was sort of where we tried to get to it. And so need food and no long-term commitment. Ever. One of the things we struggled with a lot, we had to always, Civil Defence wanted us to give a report on the number of volunteers we were expecting the next day, and the number that we would expect, the numbers that we had each day. But it was very difficult to actually quantify the numbers, and certainly impossible to predict. We couldn't ever get commercial caterers in because they wanted to know specific numbers. They wanted to know, if you're going to have 500 people tomorrow, you need to let us know at 12 o'clock the day before. But we just had no idea because the situation changes all the time. And so with the food, and a comment that came through our research with the farming army, we'd have no idea if 200 people were going to turn up or 1,000. And there were a couple of days when we were anticipating 500 and 1,000 people turned up. And when it eventually got to 1,800 people showed up, we were really in the poop for food. But we managed to just pull enough in and pull it together. And I guess the other thing is students are not free labourers, and they certainly do not like being taken advantage of. And that was something we had to monitor quite carefully, particularly around the integrity of the data and the information that we were collecting and the jobs that we were sending individuals to. This is just a bit of a structure which it's actually quite difficult to read, but it just sort of sets out the utilise current tools in emergency on the far left there, and then capitalise on the desire to volunteer. So whether you're in the private sector, public sector, and you're a volunteer or you're a project manager and have that sort of skills, in this sort of situation there is an incredible ability to get the top level people no matter what stream they're in. And that was that's why it worked, essentially. We were able to tap into the very best people in the very best field at whatever they do and bring them into the operation. We sort of created a rough organisational structure around that, and that pretty much stemmed from looking around EOC and going, they have a logistics, they have a welfare, they have an operations, what do they do? Let's make those teams. It seems like a good idea. And let's put some people in charge of them, and let's see where it grows to. And it worked quite well by having some top-level people helping out. And the actions that come out of that, transport, the transport team, the food and water, the managing areas, and which the result was effectively engaged and productive volunteers. The biggest change we had between September and February was in September we really had no clue what we were doing, and we thought it was all about, we couldn't see the bigger picture. We thought it was all about clearing the silt to get people back in their house and so they can get the car out of the drive. We didn't have a great enough appreciation for the mental health aspect and the welfare of the people that we were helping. And so given my time again, and pretty reflecting back on the question that was asked to Megan about reflection on what you'd do differently, we could have quite easily canvassed the whole city with 1,000 students in one day and actually got incredible data about what people's needs are and fed that back into one sort of central repository. We didn't do that. We sort of went by the seat of our pants the whole time, and we're over here, then over here, because those people were screaming quite loud, and then jumping over there to fix those ones, but not methodically checking out every single people. So there were times when groups of people got forgotten. I haven't been here the whole conference, sorry, but I know February has been covered a lot, and it's I guess the focus of things. But as I said, I was here. And the operation began again. I sat out there and I was on my phone and I just pasted our news Facebook page, which had 29 people at the start on this day a year ago, or on the 22nd of February, and had 29 likes on our Facebook page, which we'd created because we wanted to continue the momentum of volunteering in Christchurch among students. Get them off the streets, let's do something positive for a change. And we had the student volunteer army, the name and the title and the marketing that came with it, we'd already devised up. We had that on a page. There were 29 people who had liked it. When you click like on the page, sort of showing that you follow it, you as a profile follow that individual page and follow that person. So I just started pasting that around, as did my whole team. We were talking within 15 minutes after the earthquake on Facebook, using our phones about what we're going to do, how we're going to respond to this. I'd been having a couple of conversations and knew that I'd need to get back to Christchurch to try and set up and run this thing again. The Facebook page, to give you an idea, has grown from 29 people on the 22nd of February to now 27,500 people, which is it's an incredible, powerful tool for information. The structure that we used in February was very much similar to September. We'd deploy up to 1,000 people a day on buses to suburbs to clean up. There'd be the 30 people on a bus. There'd be a bus leader in charge of that bus. There'd be an area leader in charge of, say, 5 to 10 buses, depending on the competence of the person. And then the two guys who are in charge of logistics, who actually sort out where they're going, and then the mapping people who sort of oversaw it all. There was the street teams, which Megan again referenced before, who delivered a lot of information from PIMS and from the EQC. Anyway, any other information, Ministry of Social Development, and sort of just handed out information to the streets where the postal service wasn't going to, and also some of our energy was spent just. We made a decision at the start: either we organise something completely ourselves, or someone else does it completely. We're not going to do sort of a half and half, because it often can fall apart and communication can break down. And we had that when we were delivering a lot of the chemical toilets. They, under no certain authority, we had to have 100 volunteers here at 7:30 in the morning because they were going to go. And those 100 volunteers were still sitting there at 9:45, and when I turned up to see, I had quite a few complaints. And that type of administrative puddle around meant that none of those volunteers would ever wanted to do that again. And I said and we, a bit of blackmail really, said to the council and to the people who were organising that event, we will not do any volunteering with you ever again, and goodbye, pretty much. And they rang up and said, right, we're going to have it organised for tomorrow, will you give us a second chance? I'm like, yes, and had 100 volunteers there, and they had it all sorted, and it happened instantly. So mass deployment street team, the GeoOp unit again, which is what my colleague who's here, who some of you met, Jason, largely managed. He's an amazing chap who's done an incredible amount behind the scenes in pulling this information together. So by this stage we'd have the site where you'd register, you'd text and ring and phone in, and essentially it was a group of students using their personal laptops in a warehouse in Horswell, who they would travel around all these different locations actually, because they kept taking down the internet wherever they went. And it was crazy, they just would overload it and but they had an 0800, we set up an 0800 number, 0800 student. One of the biggest problems we had with the call centre though, we suddenly used to get these really difficult, complex calls. And we would sort of say, well, that's really a job for the council or civil defence or ministry or da-da-da-da-da. And they'd say, oh, well, they told us to ring you. And we're a bunch of students sitting in a warehouse. One of the key things that we tried to implement amongst all of our team were the ability to be flexible, to be innovative and be creative and solve the problem that it comes to, because we don't all know the answers. There's probably no right or wrong answer. So the mentality in the call centre, if somebody rings with 2 container loads of buckets that want to come and make compost in toilets, or somebody wants to send 75,000 pre-packed lunches from Dunedin to you and there's no one to manage that, train someone in your role and you go and manage that new project, or delegate it out. And so set up a new team for that. And everything, really quite organic, a new team for each different thing that would come along. And generally would say yes to everything, and we just would find the space for it. Or we ordered so much one time we had no room at our big tent that we had, so we started going out to a big warehouse in Horswell, in Hornby. Oh Lord, maybe just speed up. numbers, it costs overall about $59,000, which is the dollar cost that went to it, but there's an awful lot of sponsorship, and that's something that we're really keen to pursue was the importance of, while we could get everything for free because we had such a large media profile, we also just needed to support people. So we set up a sponsorship team to get money in from overseas, and we'd set up a team to get sponsorship to buy the wheelbarrows, and the team to go and build the wheelbarrows, the team to transport the wheelbarrows, and the team to fix the wheelbarrows at the end of the day. Skipping forward a wee bit, some of the major frustrations we had, the key ones were a lack of respect and appreciation from council staff towards volunteers. There was this huge divide between paid salary employees and us volunteers, almost like that they were doing us a favour by giving us a little bit of information to enable us to do some work. And it was often we found they were very demanding and uncompromising. Like, we had to have a report back by 4 o'clock in the afternoon if we wanted anything to go in some information for the next day, or to have some support from logistics for the next day. But because of the nature of what we were doing, we just really couldn't meet these deadlines, and we really struggled with that. The business as usual approach back in September nearly killed the whole thing. We could have actually gone on for another 2 weeks, and we very nearly did, but we wanted 3 or 4 minivans from council because we couldn't afford to buy any or hire any. And I saw they were sitting in the parking lot. I saw them there being used, and I knew the lady with the key. And I said, well, can we borrow these vans for tomorrow to go and fix all these people with silt? And they said, no. We're going back to business as usual tomorrow, sorry. It's all back to the usual procedures. And if you want to go and do something like this, that's your problem. It's nothing to do with council. It's not our responsibility. I was like, I'm sorry. And so it's progressed, and I went up line to try and find the person, but I couldn't get on to anyone else. I couldn't talk to anyone higher than her. I don't know who it was, and I would really love to meet her and talk over about this situation, but it killed it. And we had this list of 164 properties that we were going to go and finish the next day. And I said, look, if we're not going to finish these properties, we will send that list to you, and then it's your responsibility, and I will say that quite publicly. And they said, oh, that's fine, we'll have to lump that. And so we sent this back in, and those people never got their houses fixed because we couldn't actually help with it because of this business as usual approach that had suddenly returned in an instant. Ironically, once they got the list that I sent back to them, I had just about every high-level manager in the council ringing and begging for us to go and finish the jobs, which we did go and do so. The lack of information and data integrity was the biggest thing that we've identified really needing to fix. We could have had a lot more information out there and a lot more sort of streamlined approaches to gather information into one central situation to really build on and enable many, not just us, but many NGOs to really focus and do their work. The coordination of NGOs was something I think is an area we should all be looking into quite a lot. Having information that accurate information was also really important, and something that we certainly struggled with along the way as we built it up. And often Alan and some of the civil defence team, the Ians, who I'm not sure if you guys are here, but they were amazing in liaison roles with council. But in June, with the June earthquake, we got given the person who was the spontaneous volunteer manager was a secretary who had been put in charge of us for this particular situation. And she told me that, I said, we just need a bit of some secretarial support to do this. I can't find the numbers of volunteers. I know you've got 100 secretaries who are at home, admin people who are at home not working. Can you bring some of those in to help us? And that was out of the question. And then eventually we were able to get that, which was fantastic. And I said, but they don't have the skills that we need. We need young people who know how to use all the tools that we're already using. Can you just support these guys to run this operation for a month, which you've requested? And but having someone, I guess, on a lower hierarchical level without the experience made things very difficult for us to progress, as we'd hit the constant block wall, and every time we'd try and go up, it would go back to the spontaneous volunteer manager who would block it down, to the point that I was told, well, if you can't do the service, we'll have to get a contractor in to do it. I was like, love, we work for free. It was really quite a traumatic and difficult time, and the whāmiami and ourselves and some council managers were at this meeting, and we all walked out, and it was a really, really difficult thing. I'm sorry, out of time. Yeah, rules versus common sense, I guess. So major lessons, capture motivation. That's the biggest thing. And I think as we look around the country, we see this amazing energy to do it. But we've got to really capture that, and we've got to capture it instantly. When you talk, I guess, talk about 2 hours, which is a fantastic timeline to get a media release out. Whenever an earthquake happens in Christchurch, we've got to respond within sort of 5 to 6 minutes before the abuse starts on our Facebook page from these 27,000 people. Use technology but not let it control you. That's the biggest thing we learned in June. Okay, there's us group of students who know how to use Facebook and Twitter and everything else, and we do all these things and we think we're all clever by doing it all online. The reality is the people who actually need the help aren't the ones who can use those systems. Particularly with the farming army, the farmers who are coming in, they don't want to have to look up a little fancy website to identify and self-assign them a job. We combined our systems. The farming army used a very methodical, army-based, traditional unit of dispatch with our sign-in system, and the combination worked exceptionally well. And I think while we need to use the technology, we don't need it to take over our lives, and we've got to really importantly look at that balance. I guess an important lesson for me in terms of communications, and I guess the Civil Defence Facebook page, I believe, was I looked at it at the start of March, and it had only like 30 people who were following it, and I sort of sent someone quite an irate email saying, can we please just let us do it, I'll do it for you for free. We'll promote it around to help get information out. But sometimes you can employ a very top level comms expert to help with these things, or you can employ a 14-year-old. And just for the things that they carry around in their pockets, they are the biggest and strongest tools. Communication and messaging was the other big thing, and there's a lot of things I think I've learnt from this whole adventure, but there's a lot more that we could have been utilised for, and I'm not blaming anyone for that, because everyone has done the absolute hardest and worked so hard at this. I'm coming, I promise. There's just huge things about it. Oh Lord, can I have 2 more minutes? Is it lunchtime? I can stop now.
Yeah, go on.
You sure? Okay. Thank you. I just thought it'd be interesting to chuck in here because I'm on a community board in Christchurch, and there's always this big question that comes up: what do you do with elected members in this sort of situation? And I think the role for a really strong role for a lot of particularly community board members is in the information gathering. Again, having this information able to come from somewhere, but to be able to put it into something that can be then sort of checked and cross-referenced, and then goes out to the different networks and organisations. The coordination for that is also really important, and something that I think that's sort of what we're working on can achieve quite well. Nelson example, we got after the Nelson floods, I rang a couple of MPs up there and the councillor and said, we'd love to help and send up anything we can and support you, and that was fantastic. Talked to a couple of the Civil Defence, I think it wasn't the controller, but someone who said yes, that'd be great. We'd really love some support. If you can we'll send up our container of wheelbarrows and equipment, and we'll go from there. And the container of equipment was on the truck out of Christchurch, an hour out of Christchurch. We got a call back saying, oh, well, no, we don't know what we're going to do with this. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to base? How are you going to work out these volunteers? I said, well, we'll just base it at the school. We've already talked to people. And no, we need to put more planning out of this, and we can't do it. So you think you better turn the truck around. So we turned the truck around, because that's what I was told to do, and we really couldn't do it. It was very, very disheartening. And Jason ended up going up anyway. And the worst thing, they rang back a day later, and said, oh, actually, we really do need volunteers. Can we have 100 people tomorrow? It's like, we just can't do that. We tried anyway and tried to advertise it, but it was a complete flop. But there's just this need to actually work out what happens here. Work in Japan, I've got so much in the presentation, I'm sorry. Biggest thing we learned from Japan was, after working in the tsunami zone up in the north of Japan, was they run a centralised volunteering centre. It was really horrific, and it really puts everything that we do in New Zealand into such context. We are exceptionally lucky, I think. But also, just the heartache and that was up there was, words cannot even begin to describe it. Japanese volunteer centres, they manage and coordinate their volunteers. They pay for volunteers have to pay for insurance. They provide sites for camping and accommodation. It's quite slow and process orientated, and there are a lot of rogue volunteers who didn't do what they were told and just go off to do other things. But again, there was no respect for the volunteers. They were the bottom of the pecking order in terms of everything that happened. And you had to have an hour and a half for lunch. You could only start at 9 o'clock, and you couldn't work in the rain. There's a few sort of funny little rules like that popped up along the way. What I think we need to do in New Zealand is establish an innovative lateral thinking steering team to instantly engage with all volunteers straight after a disaster happens, to really coordinate look at what the needs are, look at what we're going to do and how we're going to put it together. Combine that with top-level administrative assistance from some councils or from whoever the council or someone in charge who can just sort of liaise and just give any support that's necessary to make this happen for the welfare of the team. Clear communication lines, clear rules, clear boundaries, but it's essentially just let a group of people who are the ones who are going to do it anyway, mix of some of our team, some of the Federated Farmers Network, someone from not so much the Red Crosses and Salvation Armies. I see them as two different categories. You've got the ones who just pop up and do things, then you've got the ones who are more established and have their plans and rules and routines. The majority of the country don't care until it actually happens, and they want to give some muffins or come and help out. Yeah. Okay. Give them a large base away from it. You said we've struggled with it a bit, and then use some different models of dispatch to actually get people out and about. Final thing. I was very lucky to meet Hillary Clinton back a year and a half ago. Name drop. What Hillary said to me is she didn't know about us because of really our work. She knew about us because we used the tools that were in our pockets. We use Facebook, we use Twitter, we use Gmail, we use Google Maps, we use the things that we use every day to do something for social good. We weren't fixated on inventing a system that everyone can use. We used what people are already using. And that was the biggest key to the way the volunteer armies work, the way that the entire team has been able to come to it, and the way it's sort of organically just been pulled together. It's been quite amazing. These three little kids, the story gold, frankincense and myrrh from the Christmas thing. These kids came out, right? Okay, I'm rushing. These kids come out. The first one comes out and said, "I bought gold." The second one comes out and says, "What do they have?" Myrrh. I've got myrrh. The third one comes out. These are 5-year-old kids, and said, "Frank sent this." Okay, and what? This is a story that Ken Robinson, who's a very well-known education expert, says in his book. What I love about the story and why I'm telling you this is because we can't underestimate what younger people and what the creative and crazies want to do sometimes. And despite it's really difficult to implement into our processes that we all have to live by, we've got to hold on to that creativity, that innovation and that ability to be spontaneous and be a bit just flexible in these sort of situations, bend the rules or just skip over them if they're not that important or relevant.